gospel, what we find is that Jesus steps on the scene, and here he is, and he is the one who comes and says, guess what? I know the names of all the stars. Doesn't quite say it that way. But what's he do instead? He goes around healing people. The story says that Simon Peter, they go to his house. His mother-in-law. Did you ever notice in the Gospels, there's no mention of Peter's wife, but he's got a mother-in-law. So he's got to have a wife somewhere, Can't you just imagine her? It's 8 o'clock. He's out there hanging out with those other disciples again. I've had the table set for 3 hours. Can you just imagine that? Well, I wonder why they left that part out of the gospel, I don't know. I think it would have been pretty cool. But Jesus goes in, and his mother-in-law, Simon Peter's mother-in-law, must be deathly ill. She's in bed because she's not getting out to take care of her company. And Jesus heals her. And not only does she get up, but she gets up immediately and boom, goes right back to what she normally does. That's how much he healed her. Wow, that's fantastic. So then word gets out. All these other people come. Jesus is healing all of them. Wow, he's exhausted. They go to bed that night. They get up the next morning. Jesus goes out by himself to pray, the gospel says. And what happens? The disciples come looking for him. Jesus, guess what? The word's gotten around. The word's gotten around that you are something special. You must be from God. And there are others that want to be healed. And what does Jesus do? He says, we're leaving, boys. Let's get going. I've got other things to do. I got to preach the good news to the other folks out there. Now, I ask you, what in the world is more important than Jesus healing people who are broken and hurt? Think about that. What could be more important that Jesus wouldn't stay as long as it took for the last one to come stumbling through and heal them? What could be more important? It's the peace that we forget. Jesus came to heal our souls. Not just to heal our brokenness here on earth, but to heal our souls. To allow us, to invite us, to give us our place around the heavenly banquet table. And that's why he left that day and went off to preach the good news to others. Because he was there not just to heal the sick, but to heal the sick souls. And to invite them into relationship with God in only the way he could. By dying for their sins and to be raised by God. The one who could name all the stars was going to lift him up, and if he can lift him up, he can lift us up as well. And that's the promise. And sometimes that's the promise that we don't spend enough time letting it soak into us. That we have a place around that heavenly banquet table. Knowing that, living in that, being aware of that, experiencing that, is what can oftentimes get us through some of the most difficult times. You think I'm kidding. Maybe you're not sure what I mean. Many, many times when I'm working with a family or a couple who are having some kind of difficulties, and I'll ask them, and I've told you this before, I'll ask them, tell me what you've done to play. And I always get the same response. They're ashamed. They haven't done anything. And that's why they're sitting there in my office, most likely. And other reasons too. And so I always tell them, look, take your refrigerator calendar and mark on your refrigerator calendar all the things you have to do. The soccer game on Wednesday, the whatever on Thursday, the whatever here, the whatever here. Mark all those things. And then someplace on that calendar, mark the spot that says, this is where we are going to play, either as a couple and or as a family. And then what happens? What happens is the same thing as Christmas. It's on the calendar, but the fact that it's on the calendar does what? It begins to pull you. It begins to keep you. It's like going to work on Monday and knowing there's a Friday. You know what I mean? Huh? It's like going to work on Monday and knowing there's a Friday. The fact that you know there's a Friday can sure make a difference on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, can't it? Yes, it can. And that's exactly what Jesus means when he says, I can't stick around here forever and just heal these people. I've got to go and preach the gospel because I'm here to heal souls. I am here to offer them their place around the heavenly banquet table. And so oftentimes we get disconnected and miss that that's really what it means when we're Christians. There's a story about this highfalutin professor and theologian, and bless their hearts, sometimes they just get so caught up in their arguments and so caught up in their studies and so caught up in all these things that they can be guilty of missing a few things. And so this highfalutin professor shows up at this seminar one day, and he's going to be the speaker. So he goes all through this argument about how he studied the Greek and the Hebrew and all these other books, and he's come to the conclusion that Jesus was a great guy, but he didn't really die, and he wasn't really raised from the dead. And so there it is, end of argument. And in the back, this old preacher stands up. Now, they had brought their sack lunches, and he had an apple left in his lunch, this old preacher. So he pulls the apple out, and he starts to eat it. Professor? Now, I haven't read any of those big books. And I haven't read the Bible in Greek or Hebrew. Finishes his apple, puts the core in the back. He says, Professor, can you tell me whether the apple I just ate was sweet or bitter? The professor says, well, of course not. I'd have to taste it to be able to tell you that. And the old preacher says, that's right. And you haven't tasted my Jesus. My friends, never forget, in all of our acts of service, in all of the ways that we are called to love, in all the ways that we're called to reach out, in all the ways that we're called to healing and to be the healing for others, it comes first from the fact that we have been promised a seat at the heavenly table. And that we need a taste of heaven. We need the opportunity to let that promise in those dark and difficult times pull us through. Keep us, carry us, promise us. If you taste that little bit of heaven, it will keep you in those dark times. It will save you. Today, we get to gather around the Lord's table. And this is yet another opportunity for us to experience a taste of heaven. Oh, that's what we need. Taste this Jesus. Oh, it's bread, it's grape juice. But the whole point is that it helps us with a little taste of heaven. Let us pray. Gracious Lord, we give you thanks this morning for the opportunity to be here, for the opportunity to share in your table, for the opportunity to receive once more that taste of heaven that reminds us there is hope. Oh Lord, as we come before you this day, there may be some who've never invited you into their lives. There may have been some who've said, I've heard about this Jesus, I've studied about this Jesus, but I've never really known this Jesus. I've never really tasted this Jesus. And I pray, O Lord, that if that be so, that this day, this time, all your children will experience that taste of heaven. That they will invite you into their heart and say, Jesus, I want you to live with me today. I want you to reach inside and I want you to cleanse me. Lord, you know that all of us, before we come to your table, we need to remember the things that we've done that have hurt you and one another and ourselves, and the things that we've left undone that have wound up hurting you and one another and ourselves. And we lay them all before you now, and we say, Lord, I'm counting on your promise to love me in spite of it all. I've never known